The clock on the wall ticked loudly as Jake wiped his dirty hands on his old work clothes. 7 o'clock in the evening, and he was still at the repair shop. His back hurt from bending over car engines all day, and his stomach made angry noises, because he hadn't eaten since morning. Jake looked around the empty garage. All the other workers had gone home hours ago. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, and tools lay scattered on the workbenches. This had been his life for the past 3 years, working long hours, barely making enough money to get by. At 28 years old, Jake never imagined his life would be this hard. Every morning, he woke up in his tiny apartment and counted the few dollars in his wallet. Every evening, he came home tired and worried about tomorrow. The bills kept coming, but the money never seemed enough. His mother was sick, really sick. The doctor said she needed expensive medicine that cost more than Jake made in a week. His younger sister was in college, trying to become a teacher. She worked part-time at a coffee shop, but it wasn't enough to pay for her books and classes. Jake sent her whatever money he could spare, even if it meant he had to skip meals. Tonight was one of those nights. Jake had planned to buy a burger on his way home, but yesterday his mother called crying. She couldn't afford her heart medicine this month. Without thinking twice, Jake took the $20 from his wallet and sent it to her. Now his stomach was empty, but at least his mother would be okay for another week. The garage was quiet, except for the sound of rain starting to fall outside. Jake gathered his tools and put them away slowly. He was in no hurry to get home to his empty refrigerator and unpaid bills sitting on his kitchen table. Just as he was about to turn off the lights, he heard a car engine making terrible noises outside. The sound got louder and louder, then suddenly stopped. Jake walked to the window and saw an old car sitting in the parking lot with steam coming from under the hood. A woman got out of the car. She looked to be in her 60s, with gray hair and simple clothes that had seen better days. Even from inside the garage, Jake could see she was upset. She kept looking at her phone and then at her broken car, walking back and forth like she didn't know what to do. Jake watched her for a moment. The smart thing would be to pretend he didn't see her and go home. The shop was officially closed. He wasn't supposed to work on cars after hours without permission. If his boss found out, he might get in trouble. Plus, Jake was tired, hungry, and had no energy left for other people's problems. But something about the woman's worried face reminded him of his own mother. The way she stood there in the rain looking helpless and scared. Jake had seen that same look on his mother's face many times when bills came in the mail, or when she felt sick but couldn't afford to see a doctor. Against his better judgment, Jake opened the garage door and stepped outside into the light rain. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out. "Are you having car trouble?" The woman looked up and Jake could see tears in her eyes. She spoke with a slight accent, and her English wasn't perfect, but Jake understood every word. "My car had stopped working," she said, pointing at the steaming vehicle. "I need to get to the hospital. My grandson, he's having surgery tonight. They called and said something went wrong. I need to be there, but I don't know what to do." Jake felt his heart sink. This wasn't just about a broken car. This was about family, about being there when someone needed you most. He knew exactly how that felt. "Let me take a look," Jake said, even though every sensible part of his brain told him this was a bad idea. The woman's face lit up with hope. "Really? You can help me? But the shop, it looks closed." "Don't worry about that," Jake said, walking toward her car. "What's your name?" "Rosa," she said, following him. "Rosa Martinez. And you are very kind to help me." Jake popped the hood of Rosa's car and immediately saw the problem. The radiator hose had burst and the engine had overheated badly. This wasn't a quick fix. It would take at least 2 hours of work and cost around $200 in parts and labor. He looked at Rosa, who was checking her phone again. She seemed to be getting more worried by the minute. "How bad is it?" she asked. Jake hesitated. He could tell her the truth, that it was expensive and would take hours to fix. He could suggest she call a family member or take a taxi to the hospital. That would be the easy way out. Instead, he found himself saying, "It's fixable, don't worry." Rosa's shoulders relaxed a little. "How much will it cost? I don't have very much money," She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "This is all I have with me." Jake stared at the $20 in her hand. It was probably all the money she had in the world, just like the $20 he had sent to his mother yesterday. He thought about his empty stomach and his own problems waiting at home, but then he looked at Rosa's worried face again, and he made a decision that surprised even himself. "Keep your money," he said. "You'll need it at the hospital." Rosa's eyes went wide. "But I can't let you work for free. That's not right." Jake was already walking toward his toolbox. "My mother is sick too," he said. "I know what it's like to worry about family. Let me help you." For the next few minutes, Jake gathered the tools he would need. Rosa stood nearby making phone calls in Spanish. From what Jake could understand, she was trying to reach her family, to tell them she would be late getting to the hospital. The auto parts store would be closing soon. Jake realized he would have to buy the parts with his own money if he wanted to help Rosa tonight. He looked at his wallet. He had exactly $15 left, money he had planned to spend on dinner. Without hesitating, Jake got in his own beat-up truck and drove to the parts store. The clerk was just about to lock the door when Jake arrived. "We're closed," the clerk said. "Please," Jake said. "I just need a radiator hose and some coolant. It's an emergency." Something in Jake's voice must have convinced the clerk, because he reopened the store and sold Jake the parts he needed. $14.50. Jake drove back to the garage with 50 cents left in his pocket and a growling stomach. Rosa was still on the phone when he returned, but she hung up quickly when she saw him. "I talked to my daughter," she said. "The surgery is going well, but they want family there just in case. You are sure you don't want my money?" "I'm sure," Jake said, already getting to work under the hood. The next 2 hours passed slowly. Jake worked by the light of his phone's flashlight, since turning on all the garage lights would attract attention from his boss, who lived nearby. His hands were steady despite his hunger, and he focused completely on fixing Rosa's car. Rosa sat on a plastic chair nearby, watching him work. She didn't say much, but every now and then she would bring him a paper towel or hold his phone, so the light shone in the right direction. "You remind me of my late husband," she said at one point. "He was always helping people, even when we didn't have much ourselves." Jake just nodded and kept working. He was thinking about his own father, who had died when Jake was 15. His father had been a mechanic too, and he always said that fixing things was about more than just cars and machines. It was about helping people get where they needed to go. By 9 o'clock, Jake had replaced the burst hose and refilled the cooling system. He also noticed that Rosa's brake pads were almost worn out, which could be dangerous. Even though she hadn't asked him to, he adjusted them so they would be safer for her drive to the hospital. "Try starting it now," Jake said, wiping his hands on his shirt. Rosa turned the key and the engine started smoothly. No more steam, no more strange noises. She got out of the car with tears in her eyes. "It works perfectly," she said. "How can I ever thank you?" She tried again to give Jake her $20, but he gently pushed her hand away. "Just get to the hospital safely," he said. "That's thanks enough." Rosa looked at Jake for a long moment, as if she was memorizing his face. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small piece of paper. "This is my phone number," she said. "If you ever need anything at all, you call me, promise me." Jake took the paper, though he couldn't imagine ever calling a stranger for help. "I promise," he said anyway. Rosa got back in her car, but before driving away, she rolled down the window. "What's your full name?" she asked. "I want to remember the young man who saved my night." "Jake Thompson," he said. "Jake Thompson," she repeated, as if she was writing it down in her mind. "I will never forget your kindness." As Rosa drove away into the rainy night, Jake stood in the empty parking lot feeling strangely satisfied. His stomach still hurt from hunger, and he still had the same problems waiting for him at home. But somehow helping Rosa had made him feel better than he had in months. He locked up the garage and drove home to his empty apartment, not knowing that this one act of kindness would change his life in ways he could never imagine. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling different. His stomach was still empty from skipping dinner the night before, but his heart felt full. He kept thinking about Rosa and wondering if her grandson was okay. As he got ready for work, he found the small piece of paper with her phone number in his pocket. He almost threw it away, but something made him keep it. Jake arrived at the garage early, like always. His boss, Mr. Wilson, was already there drinking coffee and looking at paperwork. Wilson was a short, round man who cared more about money than people. He rarely spoke to Jake except to complain about something. "You were here late last night," Wilson said without looking up. "I saw the lights were on when I drove by around 9:30. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected anyone to notice. "I was just finishing up some work," he said carefully. Wilson grunted and went back to his papers. Jake breathed a sigh of relief and started his day like normal. But throughout the morning, he couldn't stop thinking about Rosa. He wondered if she made it to the hospital in time. He wondered if her grandson was all right. Around lunchtime, Jake's phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a moment he thought it might be Rosa calling to update him. Instead, it was his sister calling from college. "Jake, I have some good news," she said, sounding excited. "Someone paid for my textbooks this semester. The bookstore said an anonymous person called and covered the whole bill. Can you believe it?" Jake was confused. "That's weird. Do you have any idea who it could be?" "No clue," his sister said. "But Jake, this means I can use my part-time job. Money for food instead of books. I've been living on nothing but pasta for weeks." After hanging up, Jake felt puzzled. Who would randomly pay for his sister's books? It had to be a mistake. These kinds of things didn't happen to people like them. 2 days later, something even stranger happened. Jake was working on a truck engine when Wilson approached him with a confused look on his face. "Thompson," Wilson said, "I got a weird phone call this morning. Some woman wants to donate tools to our shop. Good tools. Professional grade stuff." Jake looked up from the engine. "Donate? Why would someone do that?" Wilson shrugged. "She said she wanted to help hard-working mechanics have better equipment. Said she'd heard good things about our shop. Doesn't make much sense to me, but free tools are free tools." The next afternoon, a delivery truck arrived at the garage. The driver unloaded boxes of expensive tools that Jake had only dreamed of owning. Socket sets that cost hundreds of dollars. Digital diagnostic equipment worth thousands. Even a brand new hydraulic lift for heavy repairs. All the other mechanics gathered around the boxes like kids on Christmas morning. Tony, an older mechanic who had worked there for 15 years, picked up a wrench and whistled. "This is professional grade stuff," Tony said. "These tools cost more than I make in 6 months." Jake helped unpack the equipment, but he felt uneasy. Something about this whole situation seemed too coincidental. First, his sister's books got paid for, and now expensive tools were showing up at the garage. But he couldn't figure out the connection. Over. The next week, more strange things happened. The coffee machine in the break room, which had been broken for months, suddenly worked perfectly. Someone had not only fixed it, but stocked it with expensive coffee pods. The old radio that played scratchy music was replaced with a new sound system. Wilson seemed as confused as everyone else. "I keep getting these anonymous donations," he told the mechanics during a staff meeting. "Someone really wants to help this place, but they won't tell me who they are." Jake noticed that he was getting assigned to the better repair jobs. Instead of just oil changes and tire rotations, Wilson started giving him the complex engine work that paid higher commissions. When Jake asked about it, Wilson just said he was impressed with Jake's recent work quality. "You've been more focused lately," Wilson said. "More careful with your repairs. Whatever you're doing different, keep it up." Jake hadn't changed anything about his work, but he didn't argue. The extra commission money meant he could buy groceries without counting every penny. For the first time in months, he was able to send his mother her medicine money and still have enough left over for food. But the strangest thing happened on a Thursday evening. Jake was staying late again, working on a complicated transmission repair. He wanted to finish the job so the customer could pick up their car the next morning. As he worked, he heard a car pull into the parking lot. Through the window, he saw an expensive black sedan. A woman in a business suit got out and walked toward the garage. Jake couldn't see her face clearly in the dim light, but something about the way she moved seemed familiar. The woman stood outside for several minutes just watching Jake work. She didn't knock on the door or try to get his attention. She just observed, like she was studying him. Jake felt uncomfortable being watched, but he kept working. After about 10 minutes, the woman got back in her car and drove away. Jake went to the window to get a better look, but the car was already gone. The whole thing felt very strange, but Jake tried to forget about it and focus on his work. The next week brought even more surprises. Jake found an envelope taped to his locker with his name written on the outside. Inside was a $500 gift card to the grocery store where his mother shopped. There was also a note written in neat handwriting. For your mother's medicine and your family's needs, your kindness deserves to be rewarded. From a grateful friend. Jake stared at the gift card and note for a long time. Someone knew about his mother's medical bills. Someone knew he was struggling to help his family, but who? He had never told anyone at work about his personal problems except for Wilson, and Wilson definitely wasn't the type to give away $500. Jake took the gift card to his mother that evening. When she saw it, she started crying. "Jake, where did this come from?" she asked. "I'm not sure, Mom," Jake said honestly. "Someone at work wanted to help, I think." His mother held the gift card like it was made of gold. "This will buy my medicine for 3 months," she said. "And groceries, too. I can't remember the last time I didn't have to worry about food." Seeing his mother's relief made Jake feel emotional. Whoever was helping them had no idea how much difference they were making. $500 might not seem like a lot to some people, but to Jake's family it was life-changing. Back at work, Jake started paying more attention to everything around him. He noticed that Wilson seemed to be getting a lot of phone calls that he took privately in his office. He noticed that their supply orders were bigger than usual, with premium parts they normally couldn't afford to stock. One afternoon, Jake overheard Wilson talking to someone on the phone. Wilson's office door was slightly open, and Jake was working on a car nearby. "Yes, I understand," Wilson was saying. "The new owner wants us to focus more on customer service. Treat every customer like family, especially the ones who seem to be struggling financially." Jake froze. New owner? Wilson had owned the garage for 12 years. Everyone knew that. Jake had never heard anything about the business being sold. "And you're sure about the employee bonuses?" Wilson continued. "Especially for Thompson?" "Yes, I'll make sure he gets the recognition he deserves." Jake's mind raced. Someone new owned the garage, and they specifically wanted him to get bonuses? This was getting more and more confusing. That evening, Jake decided to do some investigating. He drove past the garage after hours and noticed the same black sedan parked across the street. The same woman was inside, but this time Jake got a better look at her face. His blood ran cold. It was Rosa. But she looked completely different. Instead of the simple clothes and worried expression from that rainy night, she was wearing an expensive outfit and had her hair styled professionally. She looked confident and wealthy, nothing like the desperate grandmother who had needed help with her broken-down car. Jake sat in his truck, staring at Rosa in disbelief. What was she doing here? Why was she watching the garage? And why did she look so different from the woman he had helped? Rosa seemed to notice Jake's truck. She started her car and drove away quickly, but not before Jake saw her license plate clearly. It was a personalized plate that read, "Rosa CEO. CEO?" Jake's mind was spinning with questions. Rosa was a CEO of some company? Then why had she been driving that old broken-down car? Why had she seemed so desperate and poor? Jake drove home in a daze, trying to piece everything together. The anonymous donations to the garage, his sister's paid textbooks, the gift card for his mother, Wilson's mysterious phone calls about a new owner, and now Rosa, who was apparently some kind of business executive, watching the garage where Jake worked. None of it made sense, but Jake was starting to suspect that Rosa wasn't who she had pretended to be that night. The question was, why had she lied? And what did she want with him now? As Jake lay in bed that night, he realized his life had been changing in small ways ever since he helped Rosa. good changes that he had attributed to luck or coincidence. But now he wondered if someone had been pulling strings behind the scenes. Tomorrow, he decided he would try to find some answers. He still had Rosa's phone number and it was time to use it. He needed to know the truth about who she really was and why helping her had turned his life upside down. Jake couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rosa's face in that expensive car. The woman who had seemed so desperate for help was actually driving around in a luxury sedan, watching his workplace like some kind of detective. Nothing made sense anymore. The next morning at work, Jake felt like everyone was staring at him. Of course, they weren't really, but his mind was playing tricks on him. He kept Rosa's phone number in his pocket, touching the paper every few minutes. Should he call her? What would he even say? Around 10 in the morning, Wilson called Jake into his office. Jake's heart started beating fast. Had Wilson figured out that Jake had worked on Rosa's car after hours? Was he in trouble? "Sit down, Thompson," Wilson said, pointing to a chair. Across from his desk, Jake sat down nervously, his hands sweating. Wilson looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. This was strange because Wilson rarely smiled at anyone. "I've been watching your work lately," Wilson said. "Your quality has really improved. The customers are happy and you're getting jobs done faster than before." Jake relaxed a little. "Thank you, sir. I've been trying my best." "Well, it shows," Wilson said. "I'm giving you a raise. 50 cents more per hour. Plus, you'll get higher commission on the big repair jobs." Jake's mouth fell open. 50 cents per hour might not sound like much to some people, but over a full week, that was $20 extra. Combined with better commission, it could mean an extra $100 per month. "Really?" Jake asked, hardly believing it. Wilson nodded. "The new management thinks you deserve it. They've been very impressed with your attitude and work ethic." There it was again. New management. Jake wanted to ask about it, but he was afraid of seeming too curious. "Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson," Jake said. "This really helps." "You've earned it," Wilson replied. "Now get back to work. That blue Honda needs a transmission flush." Jake left Wilson's office feeling confused but happy. The raise would make a huge difference for his family, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that Rosa was somehow behind all these good things happening to him. During his lunch break, Jake sat in his truck and stared at Rosa's phone number. Finally, he decided to call. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. "Hello?" It was definitely Rosa's voice, but she sounded different, more professional. "Hi, this is Jake Thompson," he said nervously. "From the garage. You gave me your number the other night when I fixed your car." There was a long pause. Jake wondered if she had hung up. "Jake," Rosa finally said, and her voice was warm now. "How are you? Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," Jake said. "I was just wondering how your grandson is doing. You seemed so worried that night." "He's doing much better, thank you for asking," Rosa said. "The surgery went well. He's back home now and recovering nicely." "That's great news," Jake said. He paused, trying to figure out how to ask his real questions. "Rosa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That night when I helped you, you seemed like you didn't have much money. But yesterday, I saw you driving a really nice car near my work. I'm just confused, I guess." Another long pause. Jake could hear Rosa breathing on the other end of the line. "Jake," she said slowly, "can you meet me for coffee tomorrow evening? After you get off work? There are some things I need to explain to you." Jake's heart started beating faster. "What kind of things?" "It's better if we talk in person," Rosa said. "There's a small cafe called Corner Coffee on Main Street. Do you know it?" "Yeah, I know where that is." "Can you meet me there at 7 tomorrow evening?" Jake thought about it. Part of him was scared to find out the truth, but he needed to know what was really going on. "Okay," he said. "I'll be there." "Good," Rosa said. "And Jake, thank you again for helping me that night. You have no idea how much it meant to me." After hanging up, Jake felt even more confused. Rosa sounded genuinely grateful, but there was something else in her voice, something he couldn't quite figure out. The rest of the day passed slowly. Jake tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering. Tony, the older mechanic, noticed Jake seemed distracted. "You okay, kid?" Tony asked while they were both working on cars side by side. "Yeah, just thinking about stuff," Jake replied. Tony wiped his hands on a rag and looked at Jake seriously. "You know, I've been working here for 15 years and I've never seen changes happen this fast." "What do you mean?" "All these new tools, the equipment upgrades, the better pay," Tony said. "Something big is happening, but Wilson won't tell us what. You haven't heard anything, have you?" Jake shook his head. "No, nothing." But that wasn't entirely true. Jake was starting to suspect he knew exactly what was happening, even if he didn't understand why. That evening, Jake called his sister to check on her. "Jake, the weirdest thing happened today," she said as soon as she answered the phone. "What now?" Jake asked, though he was starting to expect weird things. "Someone paid my rent for next month," she said. "My landlord called and said an anonymous person had sent a check with a note saying it was for the sister of a good man." "Jake, what's going on? First my books, now my rent. Do you know something I don't?" Jake didn't know what to say. The anonymous help was getting more personal and more specific. Someone was clearly watching his family and helping them, but they wanted to stay hidden. "I honestly don't know," Jake told his sister, "but I might find out soon." The next day, at work, Jake could barely concentrate. Several times, Wilson had to repeat instructions because Jake wasn't paying attention. When 7 o'clock finally came, Jake rushed to his truck and drove to Corner Coffee. The cafe was small and cozy, with only a few tables. Jake arrived a few minutes early and ordered a coffee he couldn't really afford. He sat at a table near the window and waited. At exactly 7 o'clock, Rosa walked in. She was wearing nice clothes, but not as fancy as the business suit he had seen her in before. She looked around the cafe until she spotted Jake, then walked over with a nervous smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting down across from him. Up close, Jake could see that Rosa looked tired. There were lines around her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, and she seemed to be carrying some kind of heavy burden. "I owe you an explanation," Rosa said without waiting for Jake to speak. Jake nodded, not trusting himself to say anything. Rosa took a deep breath. "That night when you helped me, I wasn't completely honest with you about who I am. I figured that out," Jake said quietly. "My full name is Rosa Martinez Thompson," she continued. "I own several businesses in this area, including some auto repair shops." Jake's eyes widened. "Thompson, that was the name of the garage where he worked. You own Thompson's Auto Repair?" Jake asked. Rosa nodded. "My late husband started that business 20 years ago. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited it along with several other properties and businesses." Jake felt like the room was spinning. "So you're my boss?" "Technically, yes," Rosa said. "But I don't run the day-to-day operations. I have managers like Wilson who handle that." Jake stared at her, trying to process this information. "Why were you driving that old broken-down car that night? Why did you pretend to be poor?" Rosa's expression became sad. "Because I wanted to see how my employees treat customers when they think no one important is watching." She explained that over the past year, she had been getting complaints about Thompson's Auto Repair. Customers said they were being overcharged, especially if they seemed like they couldn't afford expensive repairs. Some said the mechanics were rude or dismissive. "I decided to test it myself," Rosa said. "I borrowed an old car from a friend and dressed like someone who didn't have much money. I wanted to see what would happen if I showed up after hours with car trouble." Jake began to understand. "You were testing us." "I was testing everyone," Rosa confirmed. "I had visited 3 other auto shops that week and the results were disappointing. Either they refused to help because it was after hours or they tried to charge me twice what the repair should cost." Rosa looked directly at Jake. "But you were different. You saw someone in need and helped, even though it cost you money you didn't have. You treated me with kindness and respect not because you thought I was important but because you're a good person." Jake felt his cheeks getting red. He wasn't used to people saying such nice things about him. After that night, I started looking into your background, Rosa continued. I learned about your mother's illness, your sister's college expenses, and how hard you work to support your family. I realized you were exactly the kind of employee I wanted working for me. So you've been helping us, Jake said. The books, the rent, the gift card? Rosa nodded. I wanted to reward your kindness, but I also wanted to test you further. Test me how? To see if getting help would change you, Rosa said. Some people become entitled when things start going well for them, but you've continued working just as hard, treating customers just as well. You're still the same good person you were that rainy night. Jake didn't know what to say. Everything that had happened over the past few weeks suddenly made sense. There's something else I need to tell you, Rosa said, leaning forward. I'm planning some big changes at the garage, and I want you to be part of them. Jake's heart started beating faster. What kind of changes? Rosa smiled at Jake's question about the changes coming to the garage. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder full of papers. Jake, I've been thinking about this for months, she said, spreading some documents on the small cafe table. That night you helped me changed everything. It reminded me of why my husband started the business in the first place. Jake leaned forward to look at the papers. They looked like building plans and business documents, but he couldn't understand most of what they said. My husband always believed that an auto repair shop should be a place where people feel safe and respected, Rosa continued. He wanted to help families keep their cars running without breaking their budgets. Over the years, I think we lost sight of that mission. Rosa pointed to one of the documents. These are plans to expand Thompson's Auto Repair. We're going to add 2 more service bays, hire 3 new mechanics, and create a customer waiting area that actually feels welcoming. Jake's eyes widened. That sounds expensive. It is, Rosa agreed, but it's an investment in doing things the right way. And Jake, I want you to help me run it. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. What do you mean? Rosa pulled out another paper. I'm offering you the position of shop manager. You would oversee the daily operations, train new employees, and make sure every customer gets treated the way you treated me that night. Jake stared at the job offer in disbelief. The salary listed was more money than he had ever imagined making. It was enough to cover his mother's medical bills, his sister's college expenses, and still have money left over for a decent life. I don't understand, Jake said quietly. I'm just a mechanic. I don't know how to manage a business. You know the most important thing, Rosa replied. You know how to treat people right. Everything else can be learned. Jake felt overwhelmed. This was like something from a dream, too good to be true. Why me? You could hire someone with experience, someone who's actually qualified. Rosa's expression became serious. Jake, do you know what I saw that night when you helped me? Jake shook his head. I saw a young man who gave up his dinner money to help a stranger, Rosa said. I saw someone who worked for 2 hours in the rain without asking for anything in return. I saw the kind of person my husband was, and the kind of person I want representing my business. She paused and looked directly into Jake's eyes. Experience can be taught, Jake. Character can't. You have something that can't be bought or learned from a book. You have a good heart. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. There's more, Rosa said, pulling out another envelope. I own a small house about 10 minutes from the garage. It's been empty for 2 years. I want your family to live there. She handed Jake a set of keys. No rent, no mortgage payments. It's yours as long as you work for me. Your mother won't have to worry about housing costs anymore. And your sister can come home for visits whenever she wants. Jake held the keys in his shaking hand. He couldn't speak. I know this is a lot to take in, Rosa said gently. You don't have to give me an answer right now. Yes, Jake said suddenly. Yes, I accept, Jake said, his voice stronger now. I accept the job and the house and everything, but I have one condition. Rosa raised her eyebrows. What's that? I want to know why you really did all this, Jake said. I mean, I'm grateful, More grateful than I can ever express. But fixing one car doesn't seem like enough reason to change someone's entire life. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and filled with emotion. 5 years ago, when my husband was dying in the hospital, he made me promise something, she said. He made me promise that I would never let his business become just about money. He said that if I ever found an employee who truly cared about helping people, I should do everything in my power to support them. Tears started rolling down Rosa's cheeks. For 5 years, I looked for that person. I visited our shops, watched our employees, hoped to find someone who shared my husband's values. I was starting to think that kind of person didn't exist anymore. Wiped her eyes with a napkin. Then that night happened. My grandson really was having surgery, by the way. That part was true. I was genuinely scared and desperate. But when you helped me, when you gave up your own money and time for a complete stranger, I knew I had found what my husband wanted me to find. Jake felt a lump in his throat. Your husband sounds like he was a good man. He was, Rosa said, and you remind me of him more than you know. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jake looked around the small cafe and thought about how different his life had been just a few hours ago. This morning he was a struggling mechanic barely making ends meet. Now he was being offered a chance to completely change his family's future. When do I start? Jake asked. Rosa smiled through her tears. Monday morning. But first, there's something else I need to tell you. Jake wondered what else there could possibly be. Tomorrow I'm holding a meeting with all the employees at Thompson's Auto Repair, Rosa said. I'm going to announce the changes to the business, including your promotion. Some of the other mechanics might not be happy about it. Jake hadn't thought about that. Tony and the other guys had been working there longer than him. They might feel like he didn't deserve the promotion. I'll handle it, Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I know you will, Rosa said. But I want you to remember something. You're not getting this job because I feel sorry for you. You're getting it because you've earned it through your character and your actions. Rosa gathered up her papers and stood to leave. The house keys I gave you? The address is written on the tag. You can move in whenever you're ready. I had it cleaned and furnished this week. Jake stood up too, still holding the keys. Rosa, I don't know how to thank you. You already have, she said, by being the kind of person who stops to help someone in need even when it costs you something. Rosa headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Jake, your first job as manager is to help me find more employees like you. People who understand that fixing cars is really about helping families stay safe and mobile. After Rosa left, Jake sat back down at the cafe table. He looked at the keys in his hand and tried to process everything that had happened. In the span of one conversation, his entire life had changed. He called his mother first. Mom, are you sitting down? He asked when she answered. What's wrong? She said, immediately worried. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, Jake said. I got promoted at work, a big promotion, and Mom, we're going to have a house, a real house with no rent payments. His mother was quiet for so long that Jake thought the call had dropped. Mom, are you there? I'm here, she said, and Jake could hear her crying. Are you serious? I'm completely serious, Jake said. Your medicine bills, my worries about money, all of that is over now. Jake spent the next hour explaining everything to his mother, then called his sister with the same news. Both conversations ended with tears of joy and disbelief. That night, Jake drove to the address on the key tag. The house was small but perfect, with a nice yard and a 2-car garage. It was in a quiet neighborhood with good schools nearby. Jake sat in his truck outside the house and thought about his father, who had died when Jake was just 15. I wish you could see this, Dad, Jake said out loud. I think you'd be proud. The next morning at work, Jake arrived early as usual. But this time, he felt different. He wasn't just a struggling mechanic anymore. He was about to become a leader, someone responsible for carrying on Rosa's husband's vision of what an auto repair shop should be. Wilson called a staff meeting at 10 o'clock. All the mechanics gathered in the main bay, looking curious and slightly worried. Company meetings usually meant bad news. Rosa walked in wearing a professional business suit, looking every inch the successful businesswoman she was. Jake had to remind himself that this was the same person he had helped on that rainy night. "Good morning, everyone," Rosa said. "For those who don't know me, I'm Rosa Martinez Thompson, the owner of this business." The mechanics looked surprised. Most of them had never seen the actual owner before. "I'm here to announce some exciting changes," Rosa continued. "We're expanding the shop, hiring new people, and refocusing on what really matters, taking excellent care of our customers." She went on to explain the expansion plans and the new customer service standards. Then she got to the part Jake was nervous about. "I'm also promoting Jake Thompson to shop manager," Rosa announced. "He'll be overseeing daily operations and helping to train new employees." Jake heard some murmurs from the other mechanics. Tony looked surprised but nodded approvingly. A couple of the younger guys seemed upset. "I know some of you might have questions about this decision," Rosa said. "Let me be clear. Jake is getting this promotion because he represents the values this company was built on. He understands that our job isn't just fixing cars. It's helping families and treating every customer with respect and kindness." Rosa looked directly at Jake. "Jake, would you like to say something?" Jake's heart was pounding, but he stood up. "I just want everyone to know that I'm not here to boss anyone around," he said. "I'm here to work with all of you to make this the best auto repair shop in town. If you have ideas or concerns, my door is always open." After the meeting, Tony approached Jake. "Congratulations, kid," he said, shaking Jake's hand. "I've been watching you work, and you deserve this." As Jake looked around the garage that was now his responsibility, he thought about the chain of events that had brought him here. One act of kindness on a rainy night had changed everything. He had helped a stranger, and that stranger had turned out to be someone who could change his entire life. But more than that, Jake realized he had found his purpose. He wasn't just managing a business now. He was carrying on a legacy of kindness and helping others, just like someone had helped him when he needed it most.